Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar this morning entitled Data-Driven Personalization in a Generative AI World. We have a very provocative and exciting title for today's presentation, and we're really excited to dive into this topic, which is so thrilling, and I know top of mind for so many of our audience members wanting to learn more about these two topics in particular and innovation generally in Latin America. My name is Lindsay Lear. I'm the Managing Director of Payments and Commerce Market Intelligence. And this webinar is the culmination of our fourth annual innovation study alongside our very dear partners, Visa, who will be sharing with us today all of the insights that we collected during this year-long study. Some of you may have participated in and are here to absorb some of the results of this fantastic piece of research. And we're just really excited to bring you some really valuable content and insight around technology, around innovation, and around where the region stands today in March 2024. Very unique and special time for the industry, and we're just excited to dive into some of these changes that we're all experiencing. All right, so let's go ahead and move into our introductions. We have a terrific panel today that will be helping us explain and divulge all of the nuances, the major trends that we discovered during this research, several examples and case studies, and just fantastic intellectual thinking around what's making the region tick and advance in the payments industry this year in 2024. So we have three representatives from PCMI today: Arthur Deacon, who is the project manager, the chief analyst and leader of this research, along with Sullivan Rocha and Luca Natcuccio, who assisted in the research. You'll be hearing from all three of them today. And I'm very happy to welcome Roberta Isvert, Innovation Experience and Content Director for Latin America at Visa. Roberta, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Good day, everyone. I'm really satisfied to be here today. Like Lindsay said, this is a combination of a lot of months of work, many interviews with all of you as part of our ecosystem. So we're going to start with the slide that we always have, which are disclaimers pretty much. Long story short, I'm not going to walk you through this, but it's basically saying that these are our views, perspective, but please don't just go run and start investing in some of the companies that we're going to be mentioning here today. Next, and to kick things off, I would like to start by setting the tone on where we are as Latin America and the Caribbean region, and also perspective into the world, right? Important to say, like Lindsay said, today I'm really lucky to lead innovation and insights for Latin American Caribbean at Visa. So we do have access to a lot of consumer trends and everything else that is evolving in our ecosystem when it comes to the needs of buyers, sellers, key industry stakeholders. And the perspective we're going to share with you today is an outcome of more than 120 interviews that we did with leading companies in the region. And it reflects a lot of the structural changes and accelerated changes we've been having in the past few years. Many of them started back in 2021, 22, post-pandemic, if you guys remember that time, and now are in full effect in our industry. We're going to touch into open data, open finance, faster payments, the rise of new digital value network. We're going to discuss blockchain, tokenization of real-world assets to solve for real-world problems. And of course, we're going to do the talk of the town, generative AI. But before we dive in, let's start by setting the stage with a couple of numbers on where we are today. So if we go into the next slide, you guys are going to see some of the numbers that are setting this. So basically, as you guys know, we had the boom of e-commerce, right? We saw e-commerce sales reach over 6 trillion back last year, and we're expecting this number to rise to 5.5 trillion by the end of 24. We're also seeing mobile payments adoption skyrocket, right? Reaching 10 trillion by 2026, up from only 4.5 back in 2021. Remember again, that time when the pandemic was ongoing. And then new digital payment platforms such as Zelle, Cash App, and any other forms we do have across Latin America, expected to reach a 13 trillion number by 2027. And among these digital platforms, what we are seeing are consumers demanding payment solutions that are faster, convenient, more secure than ever, and that also offer rewards, points, and benefits, maybe in a different way than they were used to. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. Only here in North America, where I sit, in Visa headquarters for Latin America in Miami, we do see that consumers are requesting 75% of them speed and convenience as one of the top important factors of them making a choose or choosing the payment method of choice. In the next slide, you guys are also going to see the booming of adoption of new payment forms of acceptance, right? So when we talk about QR codes, for instance, on the left here in the graph, you do see, well, QR codes have been around for a long, long time. I want to say about 30 years, but they're now booming and accepting worldwide, right? So we are expecting those payments to reach about 3.5 trillion by 2026. And then when you look into the right, we're also seeing the growth of instant payments forms more than ever. And we're going to talk more about RTPs. But PIX, back in Brazil, where I'm from, is actually one of the main business cases that we have around the world today of people adopting more and more digital shapes and forms of payment. Lindsay?
Terrific. Yeah. So thank you for that kind of overview, Roberta. If we go ahead to the next slide, many of you who follow PCMI know, we've been following these trends for the past year, and it's been very exciting to observe the digital transformation of the region since the pandemic. We all know how impactful that was and continues to set the region in motion. And so we're really today in 2024 in an environment where it's no longer cash and cards. 5 years ago, really, we had a pretty simple ecosystem. Cash and cards were the landscape, right? But since then, we've seen this very dynamic transformation, and today we're starting to see other payment, a truly multi-rail environment. We still have cash, of course. Cash is still a primary payment method in the region, and especially in certain markets, we see Argentina, Colombia, Mexico, where cash is still very predominant. These are percentages of face-to-face retail. But what is also important to observe, and I think everyone who studies the region knows this, that other cash is certainly in decline, and other payment methods have really taken off and gained really significant traction. So overall, when we look at the largest markets in the region, other digital payment methods are including different types of wallets, QRs, RTPs, et cetera, are representing around 20% of retail volume in the region. And that's really significant progress from just a few years ago. So this is the context that we're going to be looking at some of the innovative trends in. And if we go to the next slide, just another reminder at where we stand in terms of penetration of banking and banking services. We have reached really significant levels of banking penetration in several markets. And by banking penetration, I mean traditional bank accounts as well as fintech accounts, digital wallets, any kind of financial account where you can store money. So we've really reached near ubiquity in some markets. Now, this is just tracking ownership, not actual usage. That's a whole nother discussion. But in terms of access, several markets in the region have really excelled. Others are still far behind, with only around half or less of the population accessing formal financial services. So the region is continuing to become more divergent, and so uncovering lots of different niche opportunities all around the region for us to continue advancing and taking advantage of these digital trends that we're going to be talking about. So let's go ahead to the next section.
Yeah. So as we deep dive and start talking about the latest insights, quick caveat here. If we look into the next slide we have, you guys are going to see the reason why we actually have this study for the past 4 years with PCMI. This is the 4th edition. We started engaging with them back in 2018. And the main reason why was because we realized we didn't have an innovation benchmark in the region when we spoke about innovation, it meant different things for different companies. And we really wanted to understand our ecosystem to see where we were heading. So first and foremost, we do and run such studies with the rationale behind understanding not only users, because that's what we do in our day to day, but also companies and our main stakeholders, the ones that will be creating the future of payments and commerce with us, but also to have that foresight. And it's not a crystal ball, but to keep track on how we're moving as a region. It was really important the past 4 years. And all I can say before Arthur jumps to tell you a little bit more of the insights we just unearthed is the future is here, closer than ever and accelerated than ever, and we're getting ready for it. So as we look into the pool that we had of companies that we interviewed in this past edition, I'll let you talk a little bit more about it, Arthur.
Thank you very much, Roberta, Lindsay. Very happy to be here. This is like was said, it's a culmination of over a year of work, I believe, over 120 interviews with leading companies across the region. So very excited to have led this project and to share these insights throughout this presentation. So if we move on to the next slide, please. As you can see, every single year we've conducted this study, the number of participants have increased. So we started back in 2018, 2019 with 85 total entities, and that has gone up to 125 in this past year. The amount of digital natives, so companies that are created with a digital focused mindset or a digital core, have also increased significantly. That makes sense post-pandemic and the way that society and technology is trending. But we had 72% of our participants as digital natives. So that just sets the stage of who participated and what kind of company participated. If we move on to the next slide, please. Of these 125 entities, we grouped them into 4 main categories. So issuing, which accounted for 30% of the companies, acceptance, which accounted for 23%, commerce and marketplaces, another 14%, and then this others/lending companies was the remaining 33%. It was spread pretty evenly throughout the region. Brazil, of course, has the biggest share of participants, but also you see Mexico, Colombia, Peru, Chile, Argentina, and also other countries in the region in the Caribbean and Central America. So now moving on to the next slide, please. So just getting into the key findings of our study. So we have 4 main emerging shifts or futuristic shifts from this innovation study. We call them emerging trends because many of them are still in its early stages in Latin America. Some of them might be more relevant in developed markets like the US and Europe, but in Latin America, for the most part, they're still pretty futuristic. So the first trend is open finance and APIs. This is mostly about using data to create new and personalized services. What we've seen in the past is that data was used to recommend services for clients or offer third-party products. But what we see happening now is the creation of a whole new set of products using customer data. That's where we're moving towards, and that's what the future is likely to hold. Trend number 2 is RTP networks, or real-time payment networks, and digital wallets. I would say that this is the trend that is most mature in the region. RTPs and digital wallets are quite widespread in certain countries, such as Brazil with Pix. But what these technologies are building up to is what we call a digital value network. And what this means, it's a digital infrastructure with real-time payment capabilities or near-time instant capabilities that enable interoperable pay-ins and payouts of any kind of digital value. So that could be cryptocurrency, that could be loyalty points, that could be money, it could be tokenized real-world assets, it could be NFTs. All of these different types of digital value transacted through a variety of payment rails. So that's what we see as the future of RTP networks and digital wallets. Trend number 3 is tokenization of real-world assets. This is basically tokenizing assets that, for the most part, have never been traded over the counter before. So this includes agricultural products such as rice or grain, and turning them into a token and an immediate form of liquidity for whoever is the owner of that asset. We'll talk about more examples of that as we progress. And then finally, the most, let's call, exciting trend is Gen AI, of course. And what we see is that Gen AI is accelerating all these previous trends that we talked about and leading to hyper personalization at scale. So basically, it's allowing for companies to use consumer data that is already available, that's being shared, to personalize services for each and every one of their customers. We'll talk a little bit more how they're doing that as we go on, but these are the four main trends that we identified in our study this year. Moving on to the next slide, please. So the first trend is open finance and APIs. And as many of you guys know, open finance is still in its relatively early stages in Latin America and the Caribbean. So here we broke it down into four different stages. First is the aggregation phase. That's essentially when companies establish the criteria and infrastructure for data sharing. It's just creating the framework, the guidelines for it. Then you move into the categorization phase, and that's when you start to standardize the different data that you've collected. Next is the expansion phase, and that's when you use the data that you've collected to broaden the service, to expand credit issuance or improve payments. One example of this is actually Banco Carrefour in Brazil. They leverage open finance to optimize credit application approvals. So what this means is that in cases where a customer's credit application is initially declined for whatever reason, they have the option, the customer has the option to grant access to their data to potentially qualify them for a loan or credit card. So it's essentially customers sharing data to increase their credit limit. And that's the kind of services, broadening of services that we see in the expansion stage. And then finally, which is a very small portion of our participants or of the participants in this year's study, is a personalization phase. And that's basically generating new, unique products and solutions for individual customers. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So what we see is that open finance is already leading to more data sharing. It's leading to new personalized products in the future. And we wanted to show a hypothetical example here. So let's say John has bank accounts in Bank A, Bank B, and Bank C, as you see here in the slide. But they only purchase travel with their Bank A credit card because they receive extra loyalty points for those travel transactions. Before open finance or prior to open finance, Bank B would never know that John was a avid international traveler. But now with visibility into all his data and transactions, not only can Bank B adjust its configurations to adapt to John's needs, it can also leverage other companies' products to offer personalized goods, so travel insurance products that match John's lifestyles. This is what open finance is enabling, and this is what the future will look like. Now I'll pass on to Luca to talk about Mercado Libre and the use of APIs.
Thank you very much, Arthur, Roberta, and Lindsay. I just wanted to make a quick commentary on Mercado Libre because Mercado Libre perfectly embodies what we labeled as the API economy 2.0. The API economy 2.0 is the use of APIs to create new products and services for the consumers, which is the next step from simply offering third-party products. So through its many different branches, from advertisements to credits, the Mercado Libre platform used data sharing and a digital API infrastructure to offer personalized solutions that range from insurance to credit for both sellers and users. So the personalization of those services at scale is the next step, which will need, as Arthur said, generative AI and open finance. So far, it's been very good for Mercado Libre, which was one of our key interviews in this study. It had 4.3 billion in revenue in Q4, 54 million unique buyers, 407 items shipped, a million items shipped, with 52% of those items being in the same day or next day delivery. So that's it for my part. And if we move on, I think we are moving into the faster payments and digital wallet section.
Thank you, Luca. Yeah, Mercado Libre is a clear leading example in the region and a participant for many years. But they really embody what we're trying to show here of open finance and APIs to create a new type of platform, a platform where everything is connected and new products can be offered based on data, essentially. So trend number 2 is about faster payments and digital wallets, which, like I mentioned, is a bit more mature in the region. But what they're catalyzing is the creation of a interoperable digital value network. And that's the exchange of a broad set of assets at any time, anywhere. It's clear that open finance and faster payments are already transforming the speed and volume in which companies exchange information. But real-time payments and digital wallets are what are enabling those types of transactions. So if we move on to the next slide, please. We already see here that payments are speeding up across the entire globe, but especially in certain countries in Latin America. For example, $3.8 trillion of RTP transactions happened in Latin America in 2023. A large majority of that, yes, was due to PIX, but that's still a large volume that represents a major share of transactions in the region. We also saw that 29% of participants in this year's study mentioned that interoperability or real-time payments as the top most exciting trends that they're watching. So it's very top of mind for the leading companies in the region. And what we see is that it's ultimately going to unlock a large pool of capital because it's allowing customers and companies to access finance in a way that they couldn't before. So if we move on to the next slide, please. PIX, we can't, go through a real-time payments conversation without mentioning PIX. They're the clear leader in the region. Lots of data here for you guys to digest. But I think what's most impressive, myself being Brazilian, is that you see all the types of small transactions between P2B or P2P all happening through PIX. And it's really impressive when you see that speed of acceleration that's happened due to PIX. And it is a clear disruptor of the industry. So if you move on to the next slide. So this is the digital value network that we've been talking about for the past few minutes. And basically, what's the clear message here is that RTP networks and P2P wallets, they're modernizing payments in Latin America, right? They're speeding up payments, they're growing financial inclusion. But the reality is that RTP networks don't yet solve for the increasing number of types of value that consumers want to exchange. Like I mentioned, the crypto, money, loyalty points. In the future, what we see is that these different types of digital value, so it could be earned wages, so ability for employees to access a portion of their wages outside of a traditional biweekly pay cycle, for example, something that could be very valuable in Latin America, or payroll credit, or anything like that, based on fixed assets, is what the digital value network is going to enable. It's allowing you to access that liquidity at any point, at any time, and allow you to transact that in a faster, more interoperable way. And it's going to happen through multiple payment rails. There's going to be multiple stores of value, and it's going to lead to the growth of liquidity in the region. If we move on to the next slide, please. So I'll let Sully cover this slide and a little bit of more example about how digital wallets are expanding digital value.
Thank you, Arthur. Yes, so digital wallets, they are really driving this trend of digital value. They are enabling instant receipt of digital value. And what I mean about digital value is this could be a company salary, This could be a P2P transfer, a crypto trade, some sort of crypto asset, some investment account. So there are different forms of digital values. And these digital wallets, they are enabling this type of value to be spent in physical or online locations. And these are not limited to closed loop ecosystems. So for example, points earned by a card will be redeemable outside of the card's network or cards marketplace in any store. So digital wallets, they are integrating more and more services into their own mobile apps and becoming super apps. One example of this is Spin by OXXO, which is Mexican retailer's OXXO digital wallet. And it is a key example of this because users can pay using their Spin by OXXO Visa card or via the Spin by OXXO app, and they accumulate points. And these points, they can be used for purchases in different merchants inside the ecosystem or outside the ecosystem, or then they can be converted back to balance. So these points can be used at various partner brands. They can be used as in OXXO stores, travel agencies, mobile top-ups, or they can be converted back to balance. If we go to the next slide, please. So another key example of this increasing network effect that we are seeing is by Ibori, which acquired the Brazilian FX bank called Bex. So what they are doing right now, they take advantage of Pix real-time nature and capabilities. So using the Pix real-time liquidity, they are enabling real-time FX coding 24/7. Even though they are not, it is not possible to execute the transactions due to the FX market restrictions and timeframes, but enabling the coding and guaranteeing the price of the FX code is already a differentiator that wouldn't be possible without Pix. And with this evolution of real-time payment systems, and we are seeing in the region increasingly interest in real-time payment systems across countries, this could set the stage for new opportunities in cross-border payments and create a real-time payment across country environment. Back to you, Arthur.
Thank you, Sully. Yeah, I think anyone that's ever tried to do an FX transaction from a Latin American country to the US or any other country abroad knows how complicated it can be, and how little flexibility there is with FX markets. So companies that are providing this more instant, interactive form of transacting are definitely going to see a lot of success. Just a quick reminder as we move on to the next slides. Please feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. We'll get to them at the end of the presentation, but feel free to put those in the chat and we'll get to them a little bit later on. So the third trend, and this is a quite exciting trend, is the tokenization of real-world assets. And essentially what it's doing, it's expanding liquidity, because it's allowing retail investors like me and you to access and trade assets that before were not available unless you are an institutional company or an institutional investor. So if we move on to the next slide, please. We've heard, and what we researched is that there's over $600 trillion in over-the-counter assets that could be available for tokenization. And these are assets that cannot be traded right now by two individuals. They can be traded by entities or specific companies that are allowed to do so, but they're not available in retail markets to be traded by individuals. We have a breakdown of what these assets include. Real estate, for example, is a big part of it, but there's also other commodities and gold and arts that all play a role in that $600 trillion in assets. There's companies in Latin America that are already moving to capitalize on this opportunity. Paxos is more focused on creating the framework and the infrastructure for blockchain settlement and transactions of these tokenized assets. But we'll move on to a few other examples in which there's also the tokenization of real world assets that Latin American companies are doing. So now I'll pass it over to Luca, who will talk a little bit more about one of those examples.
Thank you very much, Arthur. Indeed, there was one leading example from Latin America in our interviews, which is AgroToken. AgroToken is an Argentine and Brazilian company who had the first infrastructure to tokenize commodities. So the company created a blockchain-based real-world asset tokenization that allows farmers to convert their grain products into liquid digital assets that can be used at any place, at any time without a minimum. So I would love to explain the whole diagram, but it's for time's sake, I have to keep it short. But I would like to let you know how it works in a few simple steps. First, the farmer deposits grains or commodities, we can call them, in exchange for a proof of grain reserve certificate. Then an oracle is in charge of issuing the certificate for the farmer after validating the grain's existence. Then the farmer gets crypto grains in exchange for this certificate. These crypto grains can be used to participate in exchanges or DeFi apps, for example, or they can be converted to fiat currency or stable coins. This is revolutionary almost, because this provides the farmers with the needed cash flow to pay down expenses or to reinvest in future harvests. Their end game, as we say in the slide, is to have access to financing in a more agile and modern way. So just last year, they already converted $70 million worth of tokenized assets, and they are capturing already a small part of the 600 trillion in over-the-counter derivatives that Arthur spoke about. Back to you, Arthur.
Thank you, Luca. Yeah, I think in a time of high interest rates, access to liquidity is extremely important, and access to affordable liquidity especially. So being able to monetize your assets in an anticipatory way is going to prove very valuable for many small businesses and large businesses across Latin America. Moving on to the next slide, please. I think what the main message of here, there's a large diagram here that you can look in your own time, but the common theme here is that we're on a path to become digital, right? And CDBCs are going to become a big part of that model. We think CDBCs will run under a centralized management, a centralized government, a central bank, for example, and its transactions will be registered in a distributed ledger. It could be blockchain, it could be other technology. And this money will be digital, centralized, and will be transacted across different mining servers. I don't want to get too technical here, but essentially what CDBCs will allow for is the tokenization of public debt and the use of smart contracts for numerous different things. And it's in the same vein of what we're saying, which is the expansion of liquidity, tokenization of assets, tokenization of debt, and that's what the future holds for banks across the region. Moving on to the next slide, please. So now we go into our last trend, and that's hyper-personalization at scale, and it's being fueled by generative AI. Generative AI is, like Roberta said, is talk of the town. Everyone has their opinion on it. We tried to interview every single company that participated and asked them about their generative AI use, what they foresee as their plans for generative AI. So we have some of the first data that's been collected on actual Gen AI use in the region. If we move on to the next slide, please. So this is more broadly about the main technologies being adopted in the region. This year, we actually measured a bit fewer amount of technologies, but we see a continued growth in next generation tech, and that ranges from biometrics to blockchain, to Gen AI to machine learning. And what we saw is that blockchain and crypto actually saw the biggest jumps in adoption. which shows that companies are still experimenting with these tools. I know that crypto prices have rebounded, but before then, there was a lot of discouragement around the crypto industry. So these tools are still relevant. They're still going to play a big role. Of course, AI is more top of mind than those tools, but AI was already being used by companies, even though it was in a different form. So the jump in AI for this year is not as large. If we move on to the next slide, please. So we actually modeled 3 different trajectories that we predict for the structural adoption of generative AI. So what we define by structural is that you're using it to basically revitalize your entire operations. It's not just using it for writing a report or writing a proposal. This is structural, using it as a core element of your company. And what we did using the data we collected is projected 3 different trajectories. There's the delayed, the current trajectory, and the accelerated trajectory. And what we see in these 3 trajectories is that by 2030, 100 in the accelerated trajectory, 100% of the companies will have adopted structural Gen AI in Latin America. In the current trajectory, we see that as 76%, and in the delayed, it would be down to 34%. The main impediments to adoption would be, costs, lack of employee intelligence over how to use these resources, other competing technologies. But essentially, what we predict is that at least 75% of the companies in Latin America will have adopted structural generative AI by 2030. If we move on to the next slide, please. Artificial intelligence is top of mind. We've mentioned this over and over. But these other technologies are also, or trends are also extremely relevant. Open finance / open banking, RTPs, and digital wallets. Those were the top 3 technologies mentioned by our participants this year. AI is leading, but there's other technologies that are also playing a role. If we move on to the next slide, please. And of the companies that we interviewed, 86% of them actually said that they're experimenting or using generative AI tools. I got to say a caveat, because a lot of them are using it for relatively simple use cases, as can be seen here. So it could be for customer service. It could be for writing or assisting code. It's not necessarily the structural generative AI that I was mentioning about. It's more being used for simple use cases, testing it, piloting it, seeing how it can improve the company's overall efficiency. But still, 86% is a very high percentage and shows great promise in the region. If we move on to the next slide, please. This is reinforcing what I just said. The advanced use cases of Gen AI, so supply chain optimization, demand or price forecasting, personalization of rewards or benefits, that is still very low. So you see 10% for a lot of these, 12, 14%. And what we see is that Latin American companies will lag 3 to 5 years, is our estimate, behind Europe and other developed markets in terms of structurally integrating generative AI into their models. And that's mostly because of the high required investment that will be necessary to adopt these technologies. Next slide, please. Now I'll pass it on to Sully to provide a real use case example of how a leading company is adopting Gen AI in the region.
Yeah, thanks, Arthur. So iFood is one of the leading delivery companies in Brazil, and they are a clear example of the usage of AI and Gen AI. They are very vocal about this, and their history also reflects the evolution of AI from predictive AI to generative AI. And it is an example of how early investment into new technologies and next-gen technologies often leads to substantial gains over competition. So their usage of AI began in 2018 when they used machine learning and AI before it was called AI for predictive modeling and to prevent fraud. So then through the acquisition of one AI focused startup in 2020 that focused on optimize customer experience, they entered in the commerce solutions using AI. So with this, they now enable the personalization of customers' orders based on previous orders. So right now they provide over 10 billion order recommendations every month. And then 2 years later, they acquired another AI-focused startup and with a tool that improves restaurants' delivery performance and management. So they integrate the AI with restaurants' WhatsApp services, digital menus, and order management systems. And then by integrating customers and restaurants and the delivery system in the same environment, this set the stage for the launch of Complete AI, which is a tool that they launched last year. And this is a new tool that creates customized orders based on client requests, and it is integrated with the restaurants, with the WhatsApp of consumers and restaurants. And this enables what we can expect in the future for new products, new tools such as improved route efficiency, managing inventory of restaurants, of providers, and a whole new set of tools. If we go to the next, please. Thanks. So another example, as Arthur mentioned, it is impossible to talk about generative AI without mentioning personalization. And I think these are two key examples of this. And also to explain this shift from predictive AI to generative AI. In our interview with Banco Carrefour, they mentioned that AI was already used in the past to create some sort of credit scoring and predict the likelihood of a loan repayment. And now with generative AI, this helps them and helps customers to agree on a repayment amount. So they have a better communication with the loan provider, and this increase the capability and the possibility that these loan will be repaid. And this is something that is commonly enabled by startups such as Nama AI, which provide personalized human-like chatbots that improves customer satisfaction. So for example, if it is talking to an elderly person, it will change the communication pattern following the brain voice, but also the customer preference. So presenting the message in a bigger font or something like this. And all this, I think, summarize the concept that generative AI applied to commerce. The key for that is personalization. Back to you, Art.
Thank you, Sully. Hopefully those examples provided some more concrete insights into how companies are using Gen AI. Of course, these are just a few examples. So there's many more out there, but it shows this evolution from predictive AI to generative AI, which is the next wave of innovation, right? If we move on to the next slide, please. What we predict as the next step of this AI journey, which according to our interviewees is still 3 to 5 years away, more or less, is the creation of proprietary generative AI solutions that can be used for both internal functions, so improving operations efficiency, etc., and external functions. The creation of this proprietary Gen AI solution, it doesn't have to be done in-house. Most companies will rely on third-party offerings, so AI as a service. And there's companies already doing this. So companies such as Semantics, which participated in our study, are offering AI as a service models, which allow clients to integrate Gen AI tools into their own operations. And this will require lower upfront costs because you don't have to actually develop the tool yourself. And it also allows for immediate integration into your operations without the whole timeline of developing a proprietary Gen AI tool. So we see these types of companies coming up in Latin America, and we think there's going to be a lot more of them in the future. if we move on to the next slide, please. I think the main message of this is that right now banks in the region tend to provide clients with a variety of different stores that can be used to redeem their loyalty points. So, for example, Netshoes in Brazil, or Magazine Luiza, or Boticário. These stores often pop up in the customer's app and allows them to redeem their loyalty points and buy products. But what we've heard from interviewees is that a lot of these stores that pop up are not actually matched with the reality of the customer. So, for example, a makeup store will show up for a 20-year-old male. So there's not as much synergy alignment between what's being showed and what the customer wants. What we think is going to happen, what we see already happening with generative AI, is banks creating a sort of digital marketplace that adapts to each individual's needs based on their recent transaction data from cards or from bank transfers. And this will provide tailored products, so personalized products within that pop-up digital store. So if you're a soccer fan, for example, the bank will provide jerseys or soccer equipment from third-party stores, but it also create new experiences. So that could be receiving a signed jersey from your favorite team, or creating an itinerary to watch your team play in the final of a championship, all of which can be purchased with digital value, right? The loyalty points that we talked about, the credit cards, the cryptocurrencies, commodities. And this creates essentially an unmatched digital value network and really keeps the customer loyal to your brand, to your service. So with that, we wrap up the main part of the presentation, and I'll give it over to Roberta to give some final remarks. Again, reminder, please ask questions. We're happy to answer them. There's a lot more that we haven't been able to share that we'll be happy to share if you guys ask. So thank you. Roberta, back to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Arthur. Thank you, team. So as we jump into what's next and a little bit to start drawing conclusions of everything that everyone shared today, please, like Arthur said, start dropping questions here in the chat. We'll try to get to pretty much all of them in time. But the most important thing of everything we heard, and as the team was talking, I was thinking about, it's a very exciting moment for us in the payments and commerce ecosystem, right? So if you think about everything that the fourth innovation of our study is reflecting on how technologies and trends are transforming our industry, and we're living it, right, and executing on it as we go, I would pretty much take a bet here that it's drawing this new ecosystem, right? A system that offers seamless customer experience that will allow for the movement of any type of good anywhere in near real time. If we would look into the four main shifts, or let's say what the future will hold. So for sure, yes, the rise of a new wave of innovation to manage and secure fast transactions faster than ever, including RTPs and digital wallets, also providing these new ways of verifying our identity, right? Authentication, authorization, handling chargebacks, returns, all that. And I would dare to say that everyone here in the industry is looking for efficiencies and challenging our business model on a daily basis. The second one would be, as payments become invisible, and it's not invisible, they're just like not noticed anymore. They're more virtual. The digital credentials are replacing for sure physical ones. And we're seeing these new form factors being created. Tap to Phone is one example that we recently launched in Brazil, expanding ways to pay and get paid. So more and more, again, choice, optionality, everything in the hand of the user and the merchant to decide how we pay and get paid. The third one, Gen AI, super excited about the topic. We've been experimenting and leveraging it a lot at Visa with our partners, and it's opening space for more data-driven services, creating personalized experiences, increasing the overall customer engagement in so many different ways that it is indeed exciting. And then the fourth one, when we look into how consumers are already, right, experimenting with new sources of value, not only cryptocurrencies, but NFTs and other shapes and forms of tokenized real world assets. How is that setting the stage of these new money movements we're seeing, right? The rise of this digital value network that Arthur spoke about, more open network, backed up by data, interoperable. How is this all shaping up? And based on the interviews and the day-to-day that we have within the industry, we can tell that these trends are already happening, right? It's not something that is in the future. It's happening in some shape or form in the region. You guys saw through the examples. Some companies, yes, more advanced than others, the leading innovative ones, and there are some legacy companies there. Don't just think that it's only disruptors or the digital guys there, but they are transforming this infrastructure. They're supporting infrastructure, especially the backend, and already applying new technologies there, implementing next generation technologies like Gen AI, blockchain, tokenization, and real-time payments comes on top of everything. And then on the other side, yes, we're in Latin America and the Caribbean. We still see many companies in early stages, but we can say that everybody's at least experimenting with it, right? So more to come. And one final thing before wrapping it up, we all talk about the positive and everything about it, but we cannot also forget about the challenges, right? There are challenges to adopt and set this future. So we know there's still some limited budget for investment and research, right? It's top of mind for many of the companies that we interview. Privacy, consumer data concerns are also rising, especially when we talk about new technologies being adopted like Gen AI. And finally, like we live in a market where high inflation, interest rates, they're also disrupting life of these consumers that we're saying are eager and adopting everything we're framing here. So we do need to keep all that in mind as well as we evolved. So no doubt for me, the future will be challenging, but very excited. And I do believe there are great opportunities for everybody here to collaborate and create and shape and form what's coming next. Lindsay, team, anything else you guys want to add to before we jump into questions?
No, great. Thank you, Roberta, for that recap, and thank you, team, for the terrific explanations and sharing of the data, and congrats on such a robust study. I want to jump right into our questions because we kind of have some interesting ones. And before we do that, if we just go to the next slide, I want to make everyone aware that this webinar is actually the result of a full-length, comprehensive written report that you can download with a lot more data, details into the examples and the trends. And so I do encourage you guys to scan that QR code. You can download it in all 3 languages. And I encourage you to take advantage of that. And we'll just leave this up here while we answer questions, so you guys have that link available. It's also in the chat, the direct link. Okay, so we have some great questions here from the audience. And, Roberta, you just mentioned challenges, right? Of course, there are a lot of challenges to this type of adoption. We're talking about really fringe trends that are hard to adapt to. So one of the questions is, okay, you guys said there's about 3 to 5 year estimated delay on AI implementations, mainly due to high cost. Does this take into consideration possible new deployments that make it easier and cheaper to deploy AI? And if you guys have any insight around that, that would be great.
I can start with a brief anecdote. If anyone wants to add, please go ahead. So definitely the AI as a service models / companies is going to democratize access to Gen AI, but there's still costs in those services, right? And I think those types of companies, the AI as a service, are going to be much less numerous in Latin America as compared to in developed markets. So it's not going to be as accessible as you would see elsewhere. We still think that 3 to 5 years estimate is correct. It is an estimate, but I think that the AI as a service will facilitate access, but it won't eliminate that gap that we expect with developed markets.
Terrific. Great. And I wanted to ask a question, Roberta, if you could tell us, a lot of these trends a lot of them are related to commerce and technology, not necessarily payments per se. So Can you just elaborate on, what Visa is doing, how you guys are adapting to these trends, and how you see your business, enabling, or what role do you see Visa playing in this changing landscape?
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the question too, because when I look at where I sit, like I said at the beginning, I think we're very lucky to engage with so many partners. And I joke about the common and uncommon partners every time, because not necessarily they're the obvious ones, but I think more and more we're experimenting with outside partners and looking into how can we provide the best in class experience for the user in the end of the day. As users, we don't think about everything that goes behind the scenes or in the back end, all the investment in technology, like we were saying, or the infrastructure that we need to orchestrate as a network, as Visa, to make it all happen and seamless and faster than ever. So here we are experimenting, working on the RTP side, working with better, giving more choices and optionality to users, to merchants, to everybody. So you can choose the best one that fits you, no matter which one is your financial institution, no matter which one is your acquirer of choice. We really want to be present and make sure, like we say, that you get the best way to pay and be paid, right? We do have some solutions that I always highlight that amaze me to be living through the payments industry for quite some time now. One of them, if you look at Visa Plus, is one that we rolled out here in the US that allows for that interoperability in between P2P platforms. It amazes me to think that I could send you money, Lindsay, without asking you how you want to receive. You just choose how you want to receive, no matter how I start that payment, right? Everything that we're doing on Visa Direct, right? Allowing for these payments to happen too in a fast, secure way. Because also when we think about technology, we have this science fiction a little bit image, right? But when we interview consumers, what we hear is also, of course, it's money in the end of the day. It's payments. They're concerned about security, about risk, about how is my money getting to the other point, right? To the end point. So we invest a lot on that. And when it comes to Gen AI, AI, like we say, is no news. It's been 30 years, I think, of AI, if I'm not mistaken, and 30 years that we've been doing it here at Visa. But now with Gen AI, the possibilities are infinite. We've been experimenting from coding and the basic usage to more on how we can do personalization and offer that to our partners, and even like take it to the next level on the hyper personalization, like Arthur was showing some cases. So yeah, more and more experimenting. There's a lot in the startup front that all the fintechs are doing an amazing job too on experimenting in a very agile way, and also connecting with us. So more and more to come.
Terrific, Roberta. Thank you so much. We're just about at the end of our time. So I do want to thank everyone for your participation and tuning in. And thank you to our team, Arthur, Sullivan, Luca, and of course, Roberta, for sharing with us. Once again, I really encourage everyone to download the full report and dive deeper into the details. And we are all available to you to answer follow-up questions, answer some of the questions offline, and continue providing the guidance that we can on these emerging trends. So thank you everyone so much for tuning in, and we hope to see you very soon.